Once feared as Melbourne's most dangerous hitman, Dino Dibra ruled the city's underworld with ruthless precision and cold-blooded ambition. His reign of terror gripped the streets, but the violent world he dominated was never meant to last. In this video, we uncover the explosive power struggles, betrayals, and deadly alliances that led to the collapse of a man who thrived on fear and chaos. How far will someone go to stay on top in a world where trust is a death sentence? Brace yourself for a story of blood, power, and betrayal in the heart of Melbourne's criminal empire. Dino Dibra's life began in 1975 in the working-class neighborhood of Sunshine, Melbourne. Born into an Albanian Muslim family, Dino's childhood was shaped by both cultural richness and economic hardship. Sunshine was a melting pot, home to immigrants from across the globe: Europe, South America, Sudan, Burma, and India, to name a few. While this diversity was a source of vibrancy, the area also faced serious challenges. By the 1970s, manufacturing jobs that had supported the local economy began to disappear, leaving widespread poverty and a generation of youth with limited opportunities. Dino, like many of his peers, grew up in an environment where survival often meant bending or breaking the rules. Dino's parents, like many immigrants, struggled to learn English and integrate fully into Australian society. The cultural and language barriers made it difficult for them to find stable employment. Meanwhile, Dino and his friends, Andrew Veniamin, Benji Veniamin, and Mark Mallia, became much more adept at fitting into Australian life. They navigated the streets, school, and local sports fields with relative ease. But their immersion into Australian life didn't stop at the traditional pathways of education or work. Instead, they found a more dangerous route, one that promised fast rewards and respect: crime. By their teenage years, Dino and his friends were deeply involved in petty crimes. They stole cars, vandalized property, and ran a vehicle rebirthing operation, which involved giving stolen cars new identities. For these young men, crime wasn't just a thrill, it was a means of survival. Poverty was rampant, and with few legitimate opportunities available, the criminal underworld offered an alluring alternative. The group's early escapades laid the foundation for what would eventually become the notorious Sunshine Boys gang. Bound by blood, friendship, and a shared vision of dominating Melbourne's underworld, Dino, Benji, and Mark began to transform from petty thieves into serious criminals. At this point, a crucial figure entered their lives: Paul Kalapolitis. Paul was a martial arts champion with a violent streak and a long criminal record. His name alone was enough to instill fear in anyone who crossed his path. He took Dino and his friends under his wing, teaching them the ins and outs of serious criminal activity. Under Paul's guidance, Dino and his crew graduated from petty theft to more dangerous and profitable ventures, including drug dealing, extortion, and violent acts. Paul became a role model for Dino, showing him how to be both ruthless and strategic. He taught them how to use fear, intimidation, and violence to maintain control of their turf. Dino was a fast learner, and he soaked up Paul's lessons like a sponge. He was not only eager to prove himself, but also ambitious, hungry for power and recognition in Melbourne's underworld. With Paul's mentorship, Dino began carving out a name for himself in the city's criminal landscape. He was no longer just another tough kid from Sunshine. He was becoming a serious player in the world of organized crime. Life in Sunshine was harsh, but Dino thrived amid the neighborhood's decay. The area's growing poverty and unemployment only created more opportunities for someone willing to break the rules. Dino wasn't just a product of his environment, he mastered it. He used the disadvantages that came with growing up in a marginalized, struggling community to propel himself into power. By the time he was in his late teens, Dino had a reputation that preceded him. He became known for his volatile temper, his willingness to resort to violence without hesitation, and his increasing involvement in the drug trade. The Sunshine Boys were no longer just a group of kids causing trouble. They were becoming a formidable force in Melbourne's criminal world. Dino's rise to infamy can be traced back to a cold, tense night on November 23, 1988. He was still a teenager but already deeply entrenched in the criminal underworld. That night, Dino had a target: Mad Charlie Hedgie Algie. Charlie was a feared figure in the criminal community, and just the mention of his name struck fear into most people. Dino, however, was undeterred. He had learned from Paul how to be ruthless, and now was his chance to prove it. The details of that night remain unclear, but it's widely believed that Dino was involved in a violent altercation that marked a turning point in his criminal career. Dino's boldness and willingness to confront someone as dangerous as Mad Charlie solidified his place in Melbourne's criminal hierarchy. It was a defining moment that set the stage for his further rise in the world of organized crime. In the years that followed, Dino continued to build his empire. The Sunshine Boys grew in power and influence, controlling large parts of Melbourne's drug trade and engaging in violent turf wars with rival gangs. Dino's ambition, tempered by the lessons he learned from Paul Kalapolitis, made him a dangerous and unpredictable figure. His reputation for violence, coupled with his strategic thinking, allowed him to climb the ranks of Melbourne's criminal world. By the time Dino was in his 20s, he had achieved a level of notoriety that few could match. His story is a stark reminder of how circumstances, poverty, cultural isolation, and limited opportunities can shape individuals and lead them down a path of crime. Dino Dibra was not born a criminal, but the environment he grew up in, combined with his ambitions and the mentorship of dangerous figures like Paul Kalapolitis, turned him into one of Melbourne's most feared underworld figures. His journey from a struggling immigrant kid in Sunshine to a notorious gangster is a tale of survival, ambition, and the dark allure of power. Mad Charlie was known throughout Melbourne's criminal underworld for his volatile temper and ruthless dealings. He was a dangerous enemy, feared by many, but also a prime target for someone looking to make their mark. Dino Dibra saw an opportunity. Taking out Mad Charlie would not only eliminate competition, but also cement Dino's reputation as a force to be reckoned with in the criminal world. It was a bold and risky move, but Dino was ready to take it. The hit was brutal and efficient. Dino ambushed Mad Charlie, catching him off guard. In a matter of moments, Dino attacked with lethal precision, ensuring Mad Charlie wouldn't get back up. This act of violence was Dino's entry ticket into the upper echelons of Melbourne's criminal underworld. No longer just a small-time thug, Dino had officially arrived. From that moment, his criminal empire began to expand rapidly. He wasn't just a man with a gun anymore. He was becoming a key player in Melbourne's black market. Dino quickly moved into drug dealing, seizing an opportunity in the booming hydroponic marijuana market. By 2012, the market for high-quality cannabis was a goldmine, and Dino wasted no time diving headfirst into it. He set up elaborate hydroponic systems hidden in various houses throughout Melbourne, producing premium marijuana in bulk. His operation grew quickly, allowing Dino to flood the market and rake in substantial profits. His name soon became synonymous with the drug trade, and his wealth and influence skyrocketed. Dino wasn't content with just dominating the drug market. He returned to his old roots in car rebirthing, a practice he had honed during his early days of petty crime. Dino and his crew would steal cars, strip them down, and rebuild them with new parts, effectively giving them new identities. These reborn cars were then sold for a hefty profit, turning car theft into a highly lucrative business. While risky, Dino thrived on the danger and excitement of the operation. In addition to drugs and car rebirthing, Dino's gang became heavily involved in extortion. They used fear and intimidation to extort money from local businesses and rivals, expanding their control over Melbourne's underworld. Violence was an ever-present tool in Dino's operations, and he wasn't afraid to use it. However, his reliance on violence sometimes backfired. In 1994, during a botched car theft, Dino was arrested. The police began investigating him closely, and rumors swirled within his gang that he might be cooperating with the authorities. In the world of organized crime, even the suspicion of betrayal can be a death sentence. Dino knew that he needed to act quickly to clear his name and prove his loyalty to his crew. He fought back with more violence and intimidation, solidifying his position and maintaining his control over the gang. His reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable figure only grew stronger. One of the most infamous events in Dino's criminal career occurred in 1998 at the Dome nightclub. What was meant to be a regular night out quickly escalated into a bloody confrontation. Dino and his crew got into an altercation with the nightclub's bouncers, an incident fueled by drugs and bravado. In the chaos, a gun was drawn and shots were fired. Dino was involved in the shooting, which left 2 bouncers wounded and turned the nightclub into a war zone. This violent outburst added to Dino's growing infamy. He was no longer just known as a drug dealer or car thief. Now, he was a man who wouldn't hesitate to use deadly force in any situation. By the late 1990s, Dino Dibra had become a name that inspired both fear and respect in Melbourne's underworld. His rise to power had been marked by a series of violent and calculated moves, each designed to eliminate his rivals and expand his empire. Every act of brutality sent a clear message. Dino was not someone to be crossed. He was carving out his territory with fear, and he showed no signs of slowing down. After years of success in the marijuana business, Dino realized that the real money lay in synthetic drugs, particularly amphetamines and cocaine. Unlike marijuana, which required crop cycles and careful cultivation, synthetic drugs could be manufactured year-round, offering endless profit potential. Dino was smart enough to see this shift as a game-changer. He transitioned into the production and distribution of synthetic drugs, which quickly became the cornerstone of his criminal empire. Amphetamines and cocaine were the party drugs of choice in Melbourne's vibrant nightclub scene, and Dino knew exactly how to exploit this demand. He began infiltrating the city's nightclubs, neon-lit havens of hedonism where the music thumped and the drugs flowed freely. Dino wasn't just selling to users, he was supplying the suppliers. The DJs, bartenders, and even club owners were all part of his network, and everyone was making money from the arrangement. Dino's ability to embed himself so deeply into Melbourne's nightlife only solidified his position as a major player in the criminal world. He controlled the flow of drugs, profited from car rebirthing schemes, and used violence and fear to maintain his dominance. Yet, despite his success, Dino's reliance on violence would ultimately lead to his downfall. Dino Dibra's life in Melbourne's underworld was marked by violence, ambition, and a meteoric rise that ultimately led to his downfall. As he expanded his operations, particularly in the drug trade, violence became an unavoidable part of his life. The nightclubs where he thrived were breeding grounds for conflict, and turf wars often spilled onto the dance floors. Drug deals would go south, and what began as a night of partying frequently ended in chaos. Dino was always at the center of it, a dangerous mix of charm and menace. His reputation for violence grew as fast as his drug empire did. When Dino walked into a club, the tension in the air thickened. Everyone knew he was dangerous, and that fear kept people in line. But Dino's rapid success also fed his arrogance. He started to believe he was untouchable, growing more reckless as his criminal enterprises expanded. His associations with some of Melbourne's most notorious underworld figures pushed him to even greater heights. Dino began working with the Carlton Crew, a loose network of criminals that included big names like Alfonso Gangatano and the Moran brothers, Jason and Mark. These men were the real heavyweights of Melbourne's criminal world, and Dino fit right in for a while. He did their dirty work, earned his stripes, and expanded his influence within the network. But as Dino's ambition grew, so did the tension. The Carlton Crew was a volatile mix of egos and rivalries, and Dino's aggressive, impulsive style didn't sit well with everyone. Alfonso Gangatano, known as the Black Prince of Lygon Street, was one of the most dangerous men in the crew. He was as violent and unpredictable as Dino, if not more, and their alliance was always on shaky ground. While they worked together, the relationship was one of mutual suspicion. The Moran brothers, Jason and Mark, were also uneasy about Dino. They had a well-established drug operation and weren't keen on a newcomer muscling in on their turf. Although Dino initially earned the Moran brothers' trust, his erratic behavior and increasingly violent reputation made them wary. The Morans were calculated and business-minded, while Dino was unpredictable, a loose cannon who could blow up at any moment. The fallout with the Carlton Crew was inevitable. Dino's growing arrogance and his disregard for the delicate balance of alliances in Melbourne's underworld alienated his former allies. He began to see himself as invincible, flaunting his power without considering the consequences. Several violent incidents marked the beginning of Dino's downward spiral. The Dome nightclub shooting was a turning point. What should have been a routine night out turned into a bloodbath, bringing unwanted attention from both law enforcement and rival gangs. Dino's recklessness and disregard for the consequences had finally caught up with him. His split from the Carlton Crew was brutal. And soon Dino found himself increasingly isolated. His former allies had now turned into enemies. By the year 2000, Dino's once meteoric rise was beginning to unravel. He was a well-known figure in Melbourne's criminal world, but his notoriety was a double-edged sword. The more power Dino accumulated, the more enemies he made, and his reckless actions only accelerated his downfall. The turning point came with the kidnapping and assault of Richard Mladienic, a notorious standover man. Always looking to assert his dominance, Dino orchestrated the kidnapping in broad daylight. It was a brazen move that showcased his arrogance. Dino and his crew abducted Mladienic, beat him severely, and threw him into the trunk of a car. However, they underestimated Mladienic's resilience. At one point, Mladienic managed to escape the trunk, only to be recaptured and beaten again. This public spectacle brought intense law enforcement scrutiny onto Dino's operations. The police were all over him, and Dino became their prime suspect. The situation escalated when Richard Mladienic was found dead in May 2000, and all eyes turned to Dino. His reputation for violence, coupled with his involvement in the kidnapping, made him the obvious culprit. Even as the heat from law enforcement intensified, Dino wasn't done making enemies. In July 2000, he was involved in a road rage incident that left another motorist shot 5 times. This reckless outburst further solidified Dino's reputation as a dangerous, unpredictable figure, and it drew even more unwanted attention. Dino's world was crumbling around him. The enemies he had made, both within the criminal world and outside of it, were closing in. On October 14, 2000, Dino Dibra's life came to a violent end. He was gunned down outside his safe house in Sunshine West in an execution-style hit. Dino had believed his safe house was impenetrable, but his enemies had been watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As he stepped outside, he was ambushed and riddled with bullets. The hit was professional, clean, precise, and leaving no loose ends. The most chilling aspect of Dino's death was the suspected involvement of his lifelong friends, Andrew Benji Veniamin and Paul Kalapalitis. These were men Dino had trusted implicitly, the same men who had been with him through countless battles in Melbourne's underworld. But in the ruthless world of organized crime, loyalty is always fleeting. Benji, once Dino's closest ally, had transformed into a cold-blooded killer, while Paul, their mentor, was no stranger to eliminating threats, even if those threats were former friends. Dino Dibra's life and death serve as a stark reminder of the brutal realities of the criminal world. He had built his empire on violence, fear, and betrayal, but those same forces ultimately led to his demise. In the end, the loyalty he had relied on was shattered, and the alliances he had formed were torn apart. Dino's fall was as rapid and spectacular as his rise. He had carved out a fearsome reputation in Melbourne's underworld, but his ambition, arrogance, and reckless pursuit of power made him many enemies. His death wasn't just the end of his story. It was a testament to the life he had lived. Dino Dibra had thrived on chaos, but in the end, it was that very chaos that consumed him. He had built an empire on the shifting sands of violence and betrayal, and when it all came crashing down, there was no one left to stand by his side